Singer Demi Lovato is making headlines after revealing they now are non-binary and prefer the pronouns they, them. The pop star told fans the decision came after self-reflective work and that it, quote, best represents the fluidity I feel in my gender expression. Now, Lovato also tweeted, I'm doing this for those out there that haven't been able to share who they truly are with their loved ones. I spoke with GLAAD'S news and rapid response manager Mary Emily OHara about this announcement. Demi Lovato has been in the public eye since adolescence, a former child star. What exactly did Demi announce today?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. Demi Lovato announced today that they identify as non-binary and use they, them pronouns. And non-binary is a gender identity in which you feel that you either fall somewhere along the spectrum between male and female or outside of those binaries altogether.
And when someone makes the announcement that they're non-binary, is that what people should understand, that it just means this is on a spectrum?
You know, it's a great term because it's very expansive and inclusive. There's a lot of different ways that you can be non-binary. There are people who identify as trans and non-binary, and there are people who identify as non-binary and not trans. And really all it means is that you don't identify as male or female, or maybe a combination of both or somewhere along that spectrum.
Sure. So as you mentioned, Demi will now use the pronouns they, them. This is a relatively novel concept, so how can people be sensitive to this change in language?
Yeah, I mean, non-binary is a fairly new term. As a person who is non-binary and part of the community, I've seen it emerging more and more over the last decade or so, and it's especially picked up steam in the last few years. And I think what's great about that is it's giving, you know, non-binary identities, gender non-conforming people who don't fit into those male or female categories have always existed, right? There's always been people like that in every culture around the world, and different cultures have different words for it. But non-binary as a word has just really grown, and a lot more people identify that way now. In fact, last year there was a Trevor Project study of LGBTQ youth. They talked to over 40,000 youth and found that a quarter of them identify as non-binary. And among that quarter, most of those kids use they, them pronouns. And so that really shows you that this is a growing community and that there will be more people likely identifying as non-binary, more people using gender neutral pronouns like they, them. And, you know, if you have someone in your life who's who's changed their pronouns and is using something that you're not used to, I think it's okay to understand that, like, you are gonna mess up. You know, there's gonna be times where you accidentally say she or he, and it's okay to just gently correct yourself or gently correct your friend, your parent, your grandparent, and just remind them, oh, you know, they're using they, them pronouns now. It's something that takes a minute to get used to, especially for people that you've known for a really long time. But eventually everybody sort of gets it, it clicks into place, and you get used to it.
What do you think this announcement means to Demi's younger fans?
Well, like I said about that Trevor Project story, more and more LGBTQ youth do identify as non-binary and do use they, them pronouns. And the population of LGBTQ youth in general is also growing. You know, there was a study that came out earlier this year that showed that more people in the younger generation identify as lesbian than ever before, for example. And I think what that means is not necessarily that this is a new thing or that suddenly everyone's gay or something. I think that it just means that young people feel more and more confident that they will be accepted and validated and loved if they come out. You know, people don't just come out as trans or non-binary out of nowhere. Often it takes years to work up the courage to accept and embrace your own identity, and then go and ask your family and friends, your teachers and coworkers to do that as well. I think we see this more and more, right? Elliot Page came out as trans recently. A couple of years ago, we saw Caitlyn Jenner come out as trans, and we've seen people who are very high profile in Hollywood and entertainment coming out more and more about their identities. And again, I think that that's because people are believe that they're safer now and more comfortable and that they will be supported and validated. I don't think these identities are new. I don't think that this is about woke culture or any sort of sudden movement where all the kids are turning trans, or some of these theories that you may have heard. There's always going to be a backlash when things like this are happening. But the fact is that in the last few years, since non-binary and identity and non-binary pronouns have become more common and more accepted, we've seen a huge groundswell of change and moves towards equality for people who identify as non-binary. So like, for example, in 20 US states, over just the past few years, 20 US states have adopted the X gender marker on driver's licenses and state IDs. And that gives non-binary people, and many trans people as well, an opportunity to have an ID that accurately reflects your gender rather than having your ID say male or female. And that's almost half the states in the country. And in January, GLAAD reported on the fact that the White House changed its contact form to include non-binary pronouns. So you could enter your pronouns on the White House form and identify that your pronouns are they and them. And they added gender inclusive prefixes as well. Instead of Mr. and Mrs., you now have MX. And so you're just seeing this real movement for change and inclusion happening so quickly. And I think that's just such a great thing to see.
And bottom line, it's about being respectful to other people.
It is, yeah. I mean, pronouns are something that we use every day. If you think about it, unless you're using someone's name, every other word in a sentence, you have to use pronouns to talk about them. But what a lot of people don't realize is that we already use the singular they almost every day. So if you walk into a coffee shop and you see a cell phone left on the table that you're sitting down at, you're likely going to take that up to the barista and say, hey, someone left their cell phone. And that's singular they right there. You don't know if the person is male or female. You don't know anything about them. So you'll say, they left their cell phone. Will you make sure it gets back to them? That's just one example of how the singular they and non-binary pronouns work in our language every day, and they've been in our language for a long time. So if anyone, is disrespectful or sort of waves those pronouns away and poo-poos it as woke culture or a new thing, they're really not being accurate.
Interesting. Well, Mary Emily OHara, the News and Rapid Response Manager from GLAAD, thanks so much for speaking with us about this today. Thanks.
Thank you. It's great to be here.